Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining Philadelphia Youth Network's first Google Hangout. We're really excited to try to use this technology today to share our webinar on promoting youth entrepreneurship. I'm Jen Brevoort from Philadelphia Youth Network, and I have Michelle Martin here with me today.
Hello.
I'm so excited that Michelle is going to start this conversation because she has years of experience working as an entrepreneur, and she's this huge proponent of accurate and engaging youth workforce development. She's a career coach and generally just somebody who knows where all the resources are. And so you're going to get a lot of great information from her today. She's going to be sharing information about the new landscape of work and the reality that young people will craft careers out of many, many different opportunities, projects, and ventures rather than having a straightforward 9 to 5 from the time you're 20 to 50 career. This also means that we need to shift our program design, our language, our whole mindset to embrace this new career landscape and help young people engage with these cool new ventures and opportunities. And finally, she's, like I said before, this resource woman. And so the webinar kicks off what I'll call PIN's Virtual Entrepreneurship Series. So the next few weeks, you're going to have access to this awesome website called Studio E, and you'll be enrolled in Try It Tuesdays, which she'll tell you about. But for the next 6 weeks, you're going to get actionable Try It Now techniques to do in your programs so that we can launch this stuff immediately and not wait until you get a new grant or a whole new opportunity, but we can do it now. So our roles this webinar, Michelle's the content woman. She's going to share all the resources, and I'm going to be managing your questions and sort of jumping in if I have a clarification point. So please communicate with me throughout the webinar so that you can get your questions answered. The Hangout has a question button on your screen, so if you're watching it through your Gmail account on that events website, you'll be able to ask questions. So Michelle, thanks for being here, and take it away.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Jen. It's great to be here. And before I get started talking about the whole issue of entrepreneurship, I did want to briefly talk about the fact that we are using Hangouts. And in fact, we're using Hangouts on Air for this project. One of the reasons we're doing this is because what entrepreneurs do is experiment. And so we wanted to experiment with using a different kind of tool to do webinars. Another thing that entrepreneurs do, of course, is try to keep their costs as low as possible. And Hangouts is something that's actually free, and so we wanted to experiment with what it would be like to use this free tool to do a webinar rather than using something like WebEx or that kind of thing, since we know most of you are probably not in a position to be able to afford that kind of technology. So, as with all experiments, also bear with us. There may be some technological glitches along the way. We think we have everything smoothed out, but there, may be some little things along the way. So, what we wanted to do, I'm going to actually switch over to sharing my screen. So, you're also going to have to kind of bear with us while we go through the sharing process. And get started with me being able to get through the slides and the slideshow. This is really about how can we go about promoting youth entrepreneurship? How can we help young people begin to see entrepreneurship as a possibility for themselves? And as Jen said, I'm someone who I have a ton of background in career development. I'm a career development facilitator, instructor. And my entire business is built on providing services to workforce development agencies and organizations to help them provide really strong employment programs. But I've also become very passionate about entrepreneurship, partly because I'm a small business owner myself and I see all the opportunities that I've been able to create for myself, but also because as I look at how the world is changing and careers are changing, I see how critical it is that we really do a much better job of preparing not only young people, I do this with adults too, we really have to be much more entrepreneurial about our work and about our careers. So our agenda for today, we're first going to talk about what I call the entrepreneurship imperative and some things that I think are both pressures in the job market or in the labor market that really have us thinking differently about our careers, and also some expanding opportunities that contribute to creating that imperative. And then we're going to talk about how do we expand our capacity as youth and workforce development practitioners to really support young people in becoming more entrepreneurial, and which I will argue means that we have to become more entrepreneurial. And then we're going to share with you some of the Studio E supports and resources and information that we've set up and that we want to start using to help generate some more discussion about entrepreneurship. How can we integrate entrepreneurship more effectively into our work with young people? So let's talk about the entrepreneurial imperative. And what I see are a lot of trends that are going on in the labor market. And we're aware of a lot of these things, but I think we have to kind of put it all together. One thing that I see in most youth programs is that we're really focused on helping young people find a job. It's all about, how do you become work ready, how do you develop that work ethic, etc. All of that in service of getting a job, and that I would characterize a job as being you working for someone else. But the thing is, there's some things that are really going on in the labor market that are making jobs a challenge, making it difficult for us to be talking to young people about jobs because of all the changes and issues that we're dealing with. One of these is that the youth unemployment rate is very high. It's actually twice the rate of older job seekers. So young people are having a harder and harder time breaking into the job market, in part because there's so many people who have more experience and have been out in the job market longer. They're taking over jobs that traditionally younger people would have taken over. Another thing that we're seeing is that there are not enough jobs to go around. There are actually 3 job seekers for every job opening, 3 unemployed job seekers for every job opening. We actually have, since the recession, a deficit of 9 million jobs nationally. And we are not really keeping up with filling that deficit. And in 2014, only 24% of employers are reporting that they plan to hire full-time, quote-unquote, permanent workers. So there really, as I say, are not enough jobs to go around for everyone. Another thing that we're seeing is that job growth is not keeping up with the entry of new people into the working age population, and this is projected to continue for the foreseeable future. I'll talk about some trends about why that's happening, but the reality is we are not creating enough jobs to keep up with the new people coming into the workforce. Another thing that we're seeing is that jobs are more likely part-time jobs as opposed to full-time jobs. And we're also seeing that there are many jobs that are freelance. By 2020, more than 40% of the American workforce, that's 60 million people, are likely to be freelancers, contractors, or temp workers, according to a recent study that was done by Intuit. So we're really seeing a change in the types of jobs that are available, and the idea that full-time permanent work is something that is achievable for people starts to seem like more of an issue. Another thing we're seeing is there are declining wages. The inflation-adjusted wages for high school grads are down 12.7%. And even for college grads, it's down 8.8%. So even if you can find a job, the wages for those jobs are not keeping up. They're not what they once were. So that becomes another issue. There was a report that was put out by the NELP where they looked at what we're seeing as a low wage recovery in the job market. There are 2 million fewer jobs in mid and higher wage industries. And where jobs are being created, they're in the lower wage industries. Again, something else that suggests that jobs may not be the best thing. There was an article in the Washington Post recently about trucking and how being a truck driver used to be a ticket to the middle class, and now it's just another low-wage job. That's just the latest example of how many jobs that we had traditionally seen as being opportunities for our young people may not be available to them. Even if they do get those jobs, they're not that ticket to the middle class that we had once thought. Another thing we really have to look at is how technology is impacting jobs, and I want to go quickly over a couple of different examples. Google has developed the driverless car, and they're continuing to develop it. There's a good likelihood that in the next 10 to 15 years, jobs that drivers had typically held, truck drivers, taxi drivers, and so forth, will be done by the driverless cars, which actually have a better driving record than human beings. Another thing that we're seeing, and this is a pressure we've already seen, with robots and software and technology, logistics and distribution have changed radically. You can run a huge warehouse, and this is what Amazon does, for example, with Kiva robots, and you only have 20 live people who are moving, tons of stuff through the warehouses. Those typically were jobs that young people could have taken, but now there are just not as many jobs like that available. Even lawyers are being replaced by software. As technology changes and it's able to do some more sophisticated processes, work that typically have been done by lawyers is now being done by software. There was even, I know healthcare is something that we're often talking to young people about as another career option. The Northeastern University recently developed a virtual nurse and exercise coach. It's actually computer software. People preferred working with the virtual nurse because they felt like they got better customer service, and they were also more likely to keep up with the discharge information that the nurse had given them, the robot nurse had given them. So they were getting better outcomes. This is the reality of the marketplace, that the technology is radically changing how jobs get done, and in many cases it's ending up replacing human workers. So talking to young people about jobs and saying that jobs is like, that's the viable career path, or the one career path you should really focus on and prepare for, that's just not that's just not a good opportunity for the future. And so we really have to look at what are the opportunities. So I've been talking about some things that are kind of negative, but I want to talk about some new opportunities. Jen, did you have a question or a comment?
I just wanted to jump in real quick. It looks like our question and answer feature isn't working well right now.
Okay.
So I just wanted to let people know that they could text me their questions, unless you have another idea, Michelle.
They should. They may also be able to comment if they're logged into Gmail. They can comment on the events page, or they can comment on the YouTube page.
Okay, so I'll watch the YouTube page and the events page.
Okay.
Go ahead and put your comments there, and if you really can't get it through that, my cell phone number is on the emails I sent, so feel free to text as well. Thanks, Michelle.
Yep.
I'm very interested in the new opportunities.
Okay, so let's talk about some new opportunities and some new things that open up entrepreneurship in some ways that maybe we haven't experienced before. So technology obviously is a huge driver of change that's going on in the workplace, but that's also been provided some really great opportunities for people who are entrepreneurs. One of the things that we're seeing is the development of inexpensive 3D printers. The image that I have here is a picture of a kid who actually, they can create a 3D hand that gets printed through a 3D printer for $8 or maybe $20. And it actually works, and the kid can customize and everything else. So 3D printers are rapidly becoming available for relatively little money, and there are all kinds of cool things that you can produce with those printers. Another thing that we're seeing is the rise of online stores. There are places like Etsy where people are selling arts and crafts, Cafe Press, where if you're an artist you can upload your art and sell it through that website. There's another website called Spoonflower where people can design their own fabric, wallpaper, decals, gift wrap. So again, if you're an artist and you want to turn your art into fabric, you can use Spoonflower and then get that stuff printed on demand. Another thing we're seeing with technology is that accepting credit card payments and other kinds of payment have become much easier with things like PayPal, and you can get a PayPal thing that connects to your iPhone, so you can actually accept credit cards through your iPhone if you were at a craft fair or something like that. So that becomes another way to make payment easier. And then we also are seeing things like online marketplaces. TaskRabbit is a place where people can go to sign up to do little tasks for other people, for the customers. So customers and the people who will do the tasks can meet through TaskRabbit, and then that's a way for people to make money. Elance provides freelance opportunities for people. So there are lots of things that are happening with technology that are making entrepreneurship accessible to people in ways that it wasn't maybe before. Another thing to think about are different ways that we have, or different work arrangements that are going on. One thing that we see are things like maker spaces, which are community centers that have give people access to expensive tools. There's a place in Philadelphia called Next Fab. They call themselves the Gym for Innovators, and you can use their 3D printers. They have textile printers. They have electronics tools you can use, woodworking tools, all kinds of things that young people could use to start to manufacture or create their own little small business. Another thing that we're seeing are shared commercial spaces. There are things like shared commercial kitchens. So if people wanted to have some kind of food product that they create, they can rent or lease commercial space and be able to use that on a per-hour basis to create their food. We see co-working places. Impact Hub Philly and Independence Hall are examples of places where independent contractors and workers can come together and work together, and they can also find each other to come up with new ideas or innovative kinds of services or projects that they want to offer together. There's also crowdsourcing. More and more there are companies and organizations that are putting problems and challenges online and then paying people to solve those problems or challenges. I'm going to share one website like that that I think has a lot of opportunity for us in the youth and workforce development arenas. But that idea that you could get paid to solve a problem through crowdsourcing is another way that work arrangements are starting to change. There are also worker co-ops and collaboratives. There was a recent article in the New York Times about a group of artists who ran a bed and breakfast together, so that they owned the bed and breakfast and were workers in the bed and breakfast, so that they were able to get paid for all of that, but it also gave them a lot of time to pursue their art. So there are different kinds of work arrangements that we can use where we're combining our talents with other people to achieve our goals. Another trend that we see is the mobile trend. There are lots of things. Oh, yep, go ahead, Jen.
Before you moved on, I just wanted to let you know that at our June 19th conference that we're having, we're going to have a whole session on makerspaces.
Fantastic.
So if you're interested, come to the conference and check out the Science Center in West Philly. They have a whole makerspace, and they really want people to come and use it. So you can get your programs involved right away.
Yeah, that's a fantastic, and maker. There's something about that ability to make things that I think really engages young people. You know, being able to be hands-on in those ways. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So another trend, as I said, is lots of stuff about going mobile. So, you know, there are food trucks, of course. We see those all the time, but people using trucks, trailers, and vans to do all kinds of things. I've seen day spas, pet grooming, DNA testing, little mobile boutiques. So that whole idea of, you know, bringing stuff to you is a big trend that's going on that we can take advantage of. Related to that is the idea of pop-up shops, and those are short-term little retail spaces. They can either open up in vacant buildings, or there may be places where they're trying to lease something out, so they lease it out for, you know, 2 or 3 months for a shop as opposed to a year or 2 or 3 year long lease. There's also store within a store, so you might have a little pop-up thing going on within a larger store space. They may have space for that. So that's another thing that's really a possibility for young entrepreneurs. Another thing to think about in terms of opportunities is funding, and there are a lot of, I think there are a lot of ideas about starting a small business, where the idea is that we have to come up with a lot of cash right up front. And more what we're seeing is that's not really necessary. So we have things like crowdfunding. So Kickstarter, Indiegogo, other websites like that, people can put their project up online and then ask people to, regular people like you and I, to invest in it, and that they only do the project or create the product if they get that investment. And so that becomes a way to be able to support or get funding for your idea. Another thing we see is a lot of websites that support just-in-time production. So as an example, let's say you wanted to sell t-shirts through a site like Cafe Press or other sites like that. Rather than you having to produce a whole bunch of t-shirts and bear the cost up front, you could actually just produce those t-shirts on demand as people order them. So that means you don't have to invest anything other than your time and your marketing. There's also a lot out there about the lean startup model and the idea of coming up with a minimum viable project or product. What is the minimal thing that will start to sell that you can get people investing into, and you start to develop some capital and earn some cash, and then you're co-creating as you go along. And we see this a lot with things like computer applications, but you can do it with just about anything because it's really focused on what's the minimum thing that I can get paid for, and then how do I use that to reinvest back in my business. Another key trend and something I want to talk about in terms of the idea of opportunity is that for a lot of the people that we work with, micro-enterprise or very small business, like the things that we're talking about, is really the most reliable route to self-sufficiency for people. There was a study that was done on micro-enterprise business support. So what they found was the projects that were supporting entrepreneurship for very, very small business, it was benefiting 59% of the people they benefited were women, 53% were people of color, 56% of participants had household incomes at or below 80% of the HUD median income, and 49% were at or below 150% of the HUD poverty levels. Well, really starts to happen, and what we really see is those households that are focused on entrepreneurship and developing small business, they actually are able to better increase their assets and have a higher median net worth. If you want to move from kind of paycheck to paycheck kind of thinking, you really need to be thinking about how do I have my own business and how do I start to accumulate assets in those ways. I think that entrepreneurship is something that increases people's self-esteem and motivation. There's a great book by Dan Pink, and he talks about what is it that motivates people, and it's really a sense of having a sense of autonomy, that is, I'm in control of my own future, a sense of mastery, I'm doing something that I'm good at and I feel good about that, and a sense of purpose, I'm doing it to benefit myself and the people I care about, and I feel that there's a sense of purpose in what I do. You don't have to have a lot of extrinsic motivators if you're tapping into these things, and entrepreneurship really taps into all three of them. As I said, it's also a much more reliable route to self-sufficiency and wealth building for people. It also provides a lot of flexibility and opportunity. You have much more control over when are you going to work and how are you going to work and what are the hours and times and things that work better for you. And you can create your own opportunity rather than waiting around for jobs. And in general, it really improves your overall quality of life, because and I see that so much with people who are entrepreneurs, because they, again, feel like they have control in a way that they didn't when they were working for someone else. Another thing that we have to think about in terms of entrepreneurship is that careers look different now, and even if you are planning to get a job working for someone else, more and more what we're seeing is that companies are looking for what they call entrepreneurs, and that is people who treat the company that they're working for like it is their startup, and they bring their startup practices and their feelings about being a business owner to their job. And so learning the skills of entrepreneurship and the attitudes and thinking of entrepreneurship is a way for us to start to add value even if we are working for someone else. I think we have to start talking to young people about jobs as only one way to bring in income. We tend to, when we are talking to young people about how they're going to support themselves, we talk primarily about jobs, and so they start to equate jobs with income. But the reality is it's really only one way to do that. So here's an example of musicians who make money in a variety of different ways. Some of that may be working part-time jobs for different places, but they're also producing, CDs, and they may be teaching music lessons and everything else. So what we want to do is get young people understanding that they can have skills and talents and everything else that can be used in multiple ways, and that they really need to be thinking about the idea of multiple income streams. So not jobs, but multiple income streams, and what are different ways I can use my talents to bring in income to my family. So they may be looking at making a career from a job, but then also what are products they could sell, what are services they can sell, what's the side gig that they can do. Maybe they have multiple side gigs. It's all about that, making that career from those different kinds of ideas. To do that, we have to help teens find their spark. We have to help them find what turns them on, what are their again, their strengths, their passions. We also have to help them find their tribe. Who can they connect to, both in terms of potential customers, people who would be interested in what they have to sell, but also a tribe of other entrepreneurs, other people who are going through similar processes, because it can be really lonely and isolating to try to do business on your own. We also need to talk to young people about the fact that there is a difference between being what we call a W-2 employee, person working for someone else, and someone who's in business for themselves. There are different structures to your work and different ways that you would set things up. It definitely requires different skills. As an entrepreneur, you're having to be a lot more self-directed. You're marketing in some different ways, so you have to learn different skills and talents. There are different expectations. Customers want things from you that are different than what a quote-unquote employer wants from you, and so how do you manage those expectations and work with those expectations? How you find work is clearly different if you are working for yourself. How you manage your work is also different. It's much more on you to figure things out than it is to have a supervisor who's going to tell you what to do. We also need to talk to them about, how you get paid, because obviously if you're going to work for yourself, there are multiple ways that you might get paid, and that becomes another piece. I really think that we need to start preparing our young people for both options. Yes, you may be an employee, yes, you may have a job, but you may also be an entrepreneur. This may happen at different times in your life. You may be combining these at different times. You may pursue one or the other alone, but both of these things are really a part of everyone's career path, I think, moving forward. So to do all of this, teens need some help from us. They need to learn more about entrepreneurial thinking and decision making. There's a process that's called effectual logic, and I'll briefly talk about that later, but we also have that information about that on the website. They also need to have some proficiency with technology, because a lot of these opportunities require them to have a little bit of web savvy. They need access to tools, spaces, people who are doing this kind of work, who are entrepreneurs, and also examples of entrepreneurship. They need opportunities to practice being entrepreneurs in a safe environment. That's something that we can easily provide to them, because there's a lot that's entrepreneurial, but they need to know that they can fail, and that entrepreneurs do in fact fail. Not everything is successful. We need to have them have high expectations for their own success, and also to see entrepreneurship as a part of their career path. Again, they have to understand that this is an opportunity for them and that they can take advantage of it. So how do we expand our own capacity as practitioners, as youth and workforce development practitioners, to help young people be more entrepreneurial? The first thing I think we have to start with is that we have to unlearn some things. On the website that I'll share with you in a few minutes, we have some myth-busting information, but we definitely have to bust some myths within ourselves about what it means to be an entrepreneur, what's required, and so forth. I think in particular there's some ideas we have to unlearn, and that is that, one, a job is the best option for everyone. It isn't the best option for everyone, and in fact, I'm not sure it's the best option for anyone. We also have to unlearn the idea that kids have to have a job before they can become entrepreneurs. If you talk to expert entrepreneurs, most of them were terrible at working for other people. They weren't into it. That was part of why they started to be entrepreneurs in the first place. They learned work ethic, they learned customer service, they learned all of those things by virtue of the fact that it was their own business that they were promoting. And I think we have to get away from this idea that young people have to learn first by working for someone else. I think that it's kind of an outdated idea. We have to unlearn, but then we have to learn new skills. So we have to learn how to be entrepreneurial ourselves. We have to understand the kind of thinking and decision making that goes into being an entrepreneur so that we can start to share that with young people. So we have to start understanding the language of business, the language of startups. How do you think in terms of customer segments? How do you think about business models? All of those things. I would add that that's stuff that actually will benefit you in your own career and will also benefit your agency, because that's really the kind of thinking that pushes innovation for all of us. As we're learning new skills, then we need to be modeling that thinking and those processes for young people. One of the big areas where I think we need to be modeling things is in taking risks and failing at things. I think a lot of times we sort of hide if we've made a mistake, but in fact what goes on in entrepreneurship all the time is that you're trying out new ideas, seeing what feedback you get, and sometimes things work great and sometimes they don't. And part of the deal is figuring out, how do we work with failure? How do we work with taking a big risk and then things didn't work out? How do we recover from that? Some of our greatest business people have really been able to do that. We also need to embrace, I think, organizational entrepreneurship, so really look at how can our organizations themselves be more entrepreneurial, how can we co-create with our customers, how can we start thinking differently about the value that we bring, what products and services could we bring to market that help us bring in other kinds of income. All of that is a way for us to be more entrepreneurial and then share that with young people. Another thing that we need to do is start working with teens to help them dream and also to help them build on their passions and strengths. Some of the best businesses have come from people's dreams, their ideas of something that they wanted, something to solve a problem that they had, or something that they wanted and couldn't find out in the marketplace. So how can we help teens dream about the possibilities? Also, how can we help them build on passions and strengths? If you talk to most startup people, they're building on stuff that they're excited about. That's where their business comes from. So how can we help young people kind of find a business niche that's based on the stuff that gets them excited and that plays to their strengths? We also want to work with young people to help them find opportunities in challenges and problems. Again, something that happens a lot with businesses is that a business idea comes from some problem that people were having or some challenge that they found in their own lives, and then they decided that, hey, there's no product out here to address this, or there's no service, so I'm going to create that service. It's something that I would want myself. So how can we start getting young people thinking about, oh, I have this challenge. I'll bet other people have this challenge. What are some entrepreneurial ideas that we could come up with to deal with this challenge? Another thing that we need to do with young people is start sharing examples with them of entrepreneurs and helping them make connections to people who are entrepreneurs. And in particular, we need to connect them to the startup community. I know that sometimes we may connect young people to entrepreneurs, people who are successful and have been in business for a period of years or whatever. What they need to see are people like themselves And they also need to see people who, so teens, but they also need to see people who are in the startup, who are in the beginnings of things, because that's really where the energy is, that's where a lot of the challenges are, and young people need to see, oh, hey, I could do this too. I just had a presentation from someone who started a nonprofit that's very entrepreneurial, and they did that all based on the needs of somebody who was ill in their family. How could you make being in the hospital less terrible than it is when you have a terminal illness? And as that young man talked with students about how they came up with these ideas, the kids could really see, oh, this is something that I could do. I have a problem like that. This is something that I could create. So making connections in those early startup years, I think, is really important for young people, because they can really see how that might happen. Another thing we need to do is integrate entrepreneurship into our planning and conversations. So explicitly talking to young people as we help them develop their career plans and their goals about entrepreneurship and how entrepreneurship could fit into their plan.
Hey, Michelle.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to go back really fast to the making connections with other entrepreneurs.
Yep.
I think that's a great idea, and I want to just, connect the dots that maybe you might not know where to find those folks right away, because their businesses aren't well publicized.
Right.
But I was going to suggest that some of those Indie Hall and the other co-working spaces could be a first step. You could go to one of those co-working spaces and have a conversation with the manager and say, hey, is anybody starting something pretty cool, and could I talk to them?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we have some suggestions about that on the website. But I would suggest that you could contact a place like Impact Hub Philly or Indie Hall and say, hey, we'd like to bring kids in for a tour. Let them see what's here, because those spaces are actually very exciting. There's a lot of cool stuff going on there. And then maybe give them a chance to talk to some of the people who are working there. I think that's a fantastic idea.
Cool.
Okay, so moving along. Another thing that we want to do is start learning about and teaching young people what's called effectual logic. And I'll show you on the website, we have a whole section on the entrepreneurial mindset that talks about what we call effectual logic, which is different than what we typically teach young people about problem solving. And effectual logic basically is about saying, I have, these resources available to me. What are a bunch of different options for businesses that I could start? So, as an example, a lot of times what we'll see is somebody will say, well, I want to make T-shirts. And so they'll go create a plan that's based on I'm making T-shirts. But the effectual thinker, the entrepreneur that's using effectual logic, would say, well, I have a computer. I love to make art and to draw. And to create designs. I have some friends who really like my art. What are some different ideas of things that I could do that could create a business? Yes, I could do T-shirts, but I could also do other things. I could show other people how to draw. I could make mugs. I could, there are a whole bunch of things that I could do. And so there's a process and a logic and a thinking that goes on that we can actively teach young people and get them starting to use that logic. It's really about how do you control an uncertain future. So the idea behind effectual logic or effectual thinking is that we cannot control or predict the future. Or we can't predict the future, but we can do things to control it by taking our own next steps. What are the right next steps based on what we know right now? I've seen a lot of people try to do career planning that's a year out or 2 years out, and we're seeing that that's just not working. I've seen people who said, I'm going to go to nursing school, and in the 2 years it took for them to get through an RN program, there were no nursing jobs left. And so we really have to look at how can we start to show young people plan for some next steps and having multiple options, multiple things that you're creating for yourself in case certain things don't work out. The last suggestion or last thought is a thing that you can do is have young people explore a website called OpenIDEO. It's at www.openido.com. We'll have that actually as next week's Try It Tuesday, and I'll talk more about Try It Tuesdays in a minute. But they have a lot of cool challenges that are up there about, you know, different social problems or different kinds of issues, like how might we establish better recycling habits at home. That becomes a challenge that young people could respond to and come up with their own little entrepreneurial projects or plans that could lead to a business idea. That's a great way to connect entrepreneurship to social change. That's a whole other thing that we could be doing is social entrepreneurship, where we really are having entrepreneurship in support of creating social change. So let me talk a little bit about some of the resources that we have available to you. In a second, I'm going to show you the Studio E website that we've set up that has a lot of information and resources that you can use. We'll also want to do over the course of the next several weeks something that we're calling Try It Tuesdays. Every Tuesday on the website we'll be putting up a new activity that you can try with your young people. And we invite you to, we'll give you the activity, any resources you need for it, and then we invite you to let us know how it goes. It's a way for you to start to practice trying out new and different ideas that support entrepreneurship. Obviously, also start implementing these ideas with your students, and we would really like to start a conversation and get feedback with you about how to support entrepreneurship, not just by creating entrepreneur programs that are explicitly about let's start a business, but also how do we integrate entrepreneurship into other programs that we may be doing, how do we integrate it into our career coaching and our work with young people. So let me give you a quick tour of the website. While I'm doing that, Jen, are there any questions that you see while I'm switching over to the website?
Well, right now it looks like you're being really clear. There's been a couple questions about specific resources, and I've just been sending the specifics of where to find the websites. But
so I'm hoping, Jen, we're now seeing the Studio E website.
Yes, we're seeing the Studio E website.
Okay. So this is the website. It's at www.youthstudio-e.com. And this is kind of a work in progress. This is where we're at with it right now. We're on the home page. I just want to point out that the main sections you really want to take a look at, we have the Explore section. And in Explore, we have Rethinking Jobs, and the Rethinking Jobs, it has some video and some other kinds of information here that talk about why we need to be focusing on entrepreneurship and thinking differently about jobs. There's a section on myth busting, which also has a little video where we bust 8 common myths about entrepreneurship. We have the entrepreneurial mindset. And here there's a little video that talks about some of what I've been saying about the idea of effectual logic and walks you through what are some of the key principles of thinking like an entrepreneur. There's a page on how to integrate entrepreneurship into program design. And with that, there are some examples and some links. So, Jen, you were just talking about connecting with co-working organizations. Here I have the links to like Impact Hub Philly and Indy Hall. There's also a nonprofit in the Delaware Valley, Entrepreneur Works, and that might be a place to connect to. And so this includes some different ideas and some different things that you can use to integrate entrepreneurship into your program. There's also a section on careers and coaching, so how can you start talking to young people about entrepreneurship? It's done in the context of how do we build it into career awareness, into career exploration, and then into career preparation. We'll be adding to that as we go along. And then there's a section that has resources. I have a bunch of links up here right now, including there's a whole online course on how to build a startup, and it's free. There's some different videos here. There's an Elance startup toolkit. There are ideas for businesses, some success stories and inspiration. some reports and findings on the value of entrepreneurship, some links to books. This is, again, kind of a work in progress, so if you have resources that you use that you like, by all means, send us an email and we'll add those to the website. Another key section for you to take a look at is the blog section. This is where we're going to be posting the Try It Tuesday activities. And you can see that this week's Try It Tuesday is already up. It's based on an activity called the Inventing Game. And it really has you, you can print out onto cardstock. It's like a little card game that you can play. And Jen's excited. She's going to actually try it out at home, aren't you, Jen?
I am. If you happen to be invited to my house, you'll be forced to participate. It looks amazing, and we're going to have fun.
Yeah, I think it's a great option, and you'll see that we have some suggestions in there for how you might want to adapt the game in different ways, and some reflection questions that you can use to talk with young people after they have gone through the Inventing Game. We really want to hear from you about how this activity goes, as well as any other activities that you try out. So you can just leave us a comment on the blog below the blog post, or you can send us an email and we can do a post that features the feedback. We really want this to be responsive to your needs and to the experiences that you're having, and we're really trying to generate some conversation about how do we work with young people to support entrepreneurship? What are some things that get them excited about it? How do we, what challenges are we facing, and that kind of thing. So anything that you want to share with us, any information that you have, we really invite you to get that into us so that we can include that on the blog as well. So
Michelle, go ahead. Before you go on, I think the other reason that we're thinking of doing this in little bite-sized pieces is that we know you have already established programs that are running, but these skills help to build entrepreneurial thinking and other 21st century skills that you're trying to get through, right? So
absolutely.
This builds team building, leadership, and creativity, as well as thinking about starting small businesses.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Jen, because I think we have to understand that part of what we're trying to do with all of this is get us to broaden our idea of what it means to be an entrepreneur. And in reality, all of us have to be entrepreneurs about our careers. It's just a matter of how do you apply those skills. And so these are skills that have tremendous value, I think, across any program that you may be running. So
yeah, it's more than Shark Tank.
Oh, go ahead, Jen.
It's more than Shark Tank. That's all.
Yeah, it's not Shark Tank at all. So, but you're right. It is definitely more than Shark Tank. Because again, I think this is stuff that all of us, kind of need to have. So that's it, I think, in terms of the presentation itself. Jen, I'm going to switch back to, I'm going to quit screen sharing, and I'm going to switch back to just conversation. Any other questions or information that we need to share?
Just that you're going to want to check in with that website. I posted the website on the comment section, so you can make sure you have the address on both the YouTube and the events page. And if you have more questions, please write them in. I'm really excited about the start of this, and I think you'll want to slide through those slides a couple times and write down all those websites that Michelle shared, because they're extensive and fantastic.
Yeah, and I think we have links to everything on the website that you want. Oh, and the other thing is this is being recorded and will be available. We'll post it so that if you were not able to, if other people you worked with weren't able to be on the presentation, they can watch it later. You can also, watch it later or share it, whatever. So
I don't see any more questions at this point. So I think we can wrap up and tell everyone to have a wonderful day.
Okay, that's great. And we look forward to working more with you guys on this and learning more about what you're experiencing.
Yeah, we'll have a couple more opportunities do you remember the date of the June webinar? The 26th, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be advertising a webinar like this on youth engagement. That's the next step in this series. We'll do Try It Tuesdays for youth engagement as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so all through summer, while you're trying to keep young people excited about programs in the middle of the heat, you'll get a Try It Tuesday for that. So we invite you to join us for that session as well, and come to the conference on June 19th. It'll feel like a carnival, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Great. Thanks, Jen.
So.
Thank you.